I think the more artists I meet, the more I'm surprised at how, I don't know if I'm surprised, it's just encouraging in a way, how few people have a linear journey. We always start somewhere in like a ping pong ball. We make it finally where we're meant to be. So when I was a kid, very young kid, growing up on a farm in Ohio, I told my parents when I was about 7, I wanted to grow up, move to New York City and become an artist.
Wow.
I was 100% serious. That's what I wanted. What's odd now, 60 years later, is I think my vision was very clear then, but I just didn't have the tools, confidence, or vision to see how that would work. So I grew up. I didn't want a life on the farm. My parents, my father in particular, didn't want me to go to college. He didn't buy into all that, but I did. So I made all that happen. I had, though, an equal interest in architecture, and I couldn't. It took me many years to figure out that they weren't really two separate things for me. They were the same thing, but I just didn't get that until many years later. So I studied architecture and got an advanced degree, and then went back and minored in fine arts as well, and studied fine arts in grad school. But never really, as I got to be a young adult, never really thought a career as an artist was for me. I think in part, I heard my dad's voice in the back of my head saying, that's not a real job. You can't do that. But I don't blame him. I mean, I also loved what I was doing in the field of architecture. I started my own business in New York doing watercolors for developers and other architects. So yeah, I've had a real job when I was an apprentice architect, but since then, I haven't had what they would call a real job. My introduction to watercolor was informal. I wasn't trained in it exactly. One semester in architecture school, we were introduced to the Beaux-Arts masters in architectural design, Ledoux, Leclerc, and the guys from the 1700s through the 1800s. They did those pristine ink and watercolor washes. And it was very much a cul-de-sac and a sidecar to our architectural education. And most of my classmates thought, well, this is a waste of time. What are we going to do with this? I just thought, wow, some bell went off in my head, and I thought, okay, I can see myself taking those skills, hopefully getting good at them and adapting them professionally, which is ultimately what I did. Because I did move to New York. I took my crappy paintings around to a lot of really high-end galleries and was told no in various tones of emphasis. So then I started to try to get work doing advertising art, and I did a little, but I was counseled by one ad exec who looked at my portfolio and says, you have architecture, you have life drawing, you have pencil, you have watercolor, you have oils. What do you want to do? He said, if you want work, you have to really determine what it is you want. He said, so without thinking, just tell me, what do you like most? And I said, I love watercolor. That's what I want to do. And he said, okay, go home, throw everything in your portfolio out except that, and start to show people. And I was offended, but he was right, at least at that point of my career, that I needed to focus on one thing and try to become good at it. So all I had was this introduction, one semester in architecture school. So I just bought books and looked in the library. There wasn't much of an internet in those days to look at. too bad, but I made my way and worked up a whole series of hypothetical architectural designs done in watercolor. And from those few little paintings, I built a pretty good career for 30 years doing that for myself, for other designers and developers, etc. in New York.
Huh.
It's great, except there was a piece missing. You know, I was always painting somebody else's vision, even when I helped to design it. Obviously, by definition, it was commercial and had a client and a project in mind. And I guess I missed the emotional component to fine art. It wasn't fine art. It was skillful art, but commercial art. So I took a watercolor class with Joseph Zbukvic in 2009, I think, or 9. And one night after class, I mean, I just did it for fun.
Mhm.
And I didn't ever want to paint like him. I mean, who could?
Right.
He was so out of my realm. But what I wanted to see more than anything was, how does a real artist live?
Mm.
How do they do that? How do they navigate the world? So I was talking with him one night after class, and he said, you're a pretty good painter, which for him was high praise. He says, what do you do? I told him, and he said, you don't sound too happy about it. I said, it's fine. I really long to be a real professional artist. And he said, well, do it. I said, that's easy for you to say. I have bills to pay and rent. And he said, I don't want to hear all that. That's just excuses. If you want to do it, if there's nothing standing in your way, just do it. Just paint, is what he said.
Mm.
And everything else will work out.
Mm.
And I thought, what a condescending thing to say, except he was right. And I owe him that. He gave me the kick in the pants I think I needed. So I jumped in what I call the deep end, and I started to enter big art competitions without any real knowledge of what the hell I was doing.
Mm.
But I was very fortunate. Did I get in everything? Of course not. But I think I got over that one big hump a lot of us have starting out, that fear of rejection,
Yeah.
of always comparing ourselves to other people who we think are better or have a different insight or more skill or a better education or whatever our personal hangups are. I started to get over that and realize, if I'm going to make this work, I have to listen to myself and not worry too much about what other people say. That didn't happen overnight, and it still goes on, but it is my guiding principle. So,
Man, that is a powerful thought. And
so that's, yeah, it's too many words. I'm sorry, but that was 2010. That's when I started to become a professional artist. So just about 10 years ago, 11 years.
yeah,
And a lot has happened. So it's great.
that's a great story. Joseph has a way of boiling things down to the most essential. Like he does have a way of clarifying and saying things just as he sees them, and that's really cool that he was able to provide that bit of motivation for you.
Yeah, I think he provides it for everybody, but you have to be willing to hear it and
Yeah.
to accept it.
Yeah.
That whole no nonsense approach to your life is what I think I needed. Like, do you really want to do something? Find a way to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't work, but at least if you try your best, the odds are it might. So give it a go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Joseph did that for me. And, you know, nowadays he and I are friends, and I never saw that coming.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. That's great. I had a workshop with him in 2017, I think it was, about a year after I had started to paint. And he was very encouraging. It was a cool experience. I got to sit outside and paint with him, and he just came over and worked with me one on one a little bit. And he's like, you know, he said something kind of similar. He's like, you got to find your own path in this. Don't try to paint just like I do. A lot of people try to paint in the ways that I do, and you do see a lot of that of people trying to paint just like Joseph. And I think my first year of painting was a lot of that. And in some ways, you have to learn how other people do it and learn the language of it before you can infuse your own vision, and that's part of the process too, I guess you could say.
I can't agree more. I do think when we're all starting out, either as students or just young painters, naturally the inclination is to emulate
Yeah,
the brushwork or style or compositional choices of people we admire. But yeah, that's the thing Joseph really wants us to learn.
yeah,
And I think, I can't speak for him, but I think he's upset that fewer people don't learn that lesson, that
mhm,
you can only do that up to a point. Then you have to go out on your own
yeah,
and figure it out.
yeah,
And for me, it's one of the proudest moments of my life when I recognized that that's what I had to do. But it was
mhm,
also one of the most difficult.
yeah. It's kind of scary.
Well, when I was working as a commercial artist, it's a lot of work, but it wasn't scary. I
Yeah.
had deadlines, I had clients, I had a
Hmm.
fee I knew I was going to be paid. But deeper than that was nobody was asking me too much to tap into my own emotions or
Yeah,
insights or vulnerabilities, or
exactly. Yes.
nobody asked me what I had to say,
Yeah.
or did I have anything to say as an artist.
Hmm.
So I thought, well, I've been painting for 30 years. How hard can it be to become a professional artist?
Mm.
Well, it was the hardest thing I ever did, but the best, the most worthwhile. And I'm still learning, which is good. So,
Yeah, that part never ends, does it?
no, I hope it never does. I mean, if I ever feel like I have it all figured out, I guess I'm done. So
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to happen. I don't have it all figured out.
So you talked about when you had your portfolio full of several different kinds of mediums, and you said watercolor. What was it about watercolor specifically that drew you to it?
It's funny. Uh, I didn't know. I liked it, but I didn't know why. Um, I thought it was fun. That's a
Yeah.
simple-minded answer, but it's honest. I just thought it was fun. There were deeper meanings that I didn't figure out till years later. Now I can answer it more intelligently, I hope, is that I liked the translucency, of course, the transparency, but I think the main thing I like about it then that I didn't understand and now that I do understand is that it is the vehicle that I can use, and I know others do too. I didn't invent any of this, to express yourself in a nonverbal way by your brushstrokes, by your sense of light, by the drama you orchestrate, by your value range. I know you can do this in other medias, but to me, not as successfully as I can in watercolor, and others do as well. You, for one, if I can say that the emotional weight of your painting, to me, is so connected to the medium and the degree to which we as painters understand that the translucency, transparency, and the dynamic value range are the vehicles that carry our inspiration out into the world. I'm never trying to tell people stories or preach to them, but I want to get something about what I feel about my subjects out there.
Mm.
I don't want to explain it, but I want people to connect to it. And for me, watercolor is the only medium that allows me to do that. Secondarily, I don't know another medium that successfully allows the representation of one thing to become another thing, thereby setting up connections in the work. Meaning very fluidly, literally, a sky in a painting can become a landscape. The landscape can become a cityscape, and all of that can just melt into the water or the ground plane. And I think because watercolor does that so successfully and fluidly, you set up these energies in your painting, connections between heaven and earth, between left and right side of the paintings, between cool and warm tones, darks and lights, etc. I just could talk for 8 hours straight about the connections you can create in watercolor that help carry a narrative through without being specific, without preaching, or just it's a vehicle for my emotional response to whatever it is I'm painting.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. I think a few things. When I first picked watercolor, I didn't have experience painting in any other mediums, and for me, it just seemed like the one that you could run out to the store real quick and grab something and come back with it. I knew nothing about, quality of paper or paint or anything like that. But after I got into it and started finding artists such as yourself that I really admired and was moved by, and I learned a little more of the technique of painting, that's when I realized that painting wet into wet, I think, is the most fun part of the medium. And when you go in with a fully loaded brush and you see that color and you get the beautiful soft edges, like, that's one of my favorite things about watercolor.
Yeah, me too. It's always a rush and never gets old.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean, the way one thing can just evolve into another. And you can think about that in very philosophical terms if you want to. I tend to try to go there. I'm not all that smart, but I love that kind of thinking. On the other hand, you can just enjoy it for what it is too. It's just beautiful and satisfying. I've painted, I've studied in other mediums and oil, acrylics, all kinds of things. And to me, for me at least, they were always about the technique, and never really, for me, about how I could express anything. That's not fair, I know, because amazing work's done by millions of artists and other mediums, but it's just very personal for me. I guess too, I like the sort of a toggle between control and lack of control that you get in watercolor that I don't feel in any other medium. It kind of is a lesson in just letting go and just watching what happens, and working with that. I kind of like that. To me, that's a metaphor for the rest of life too. Stuff happens, you can't plan it all, and you have to make the best out of it.
And if you want to take it a little bit further, you have a limited amount of time in watercolor.
Yeah, on a real practical level, I'm a person with so little patience and a very narrow attention span. So for me, a watercolor, even a big complex one, is usually done in a few hours. So
yeah,
I don't like to belabor my work. I mean, you can look at some of my paintings and say, that's not true. You've obviously belabored. And it is true. But I don't like to. And my goal is to never do that. But yeah, I usually finish every painting in one sitting, even really difficult ones. So I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
After a few hours, my mind has moved on somewhere else.
I didn't know I liked that about the medium until I got further into painting. And I was like, you're excited about this one thing and how quickly you can render it. You can render it while you're feeling it, while you're excited about it. And you don't have to spend a number of days trying to come back to the same subject. And, it just doesn't really work that way for the way that we like to paint.
Yeah, I mean, you and I paint differently, but I see a lot of similarities in some ways. And I think what you hinted on is what resonates with me too. It's very simple. I mean, when we start with just paper, a couple of brushes and pigments and some water, that's all you really need. I like that. And it's immediate. There's an immediacy and almost an urgency to it that I don't get with other mediums that seem more methodical.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Thomas Schaller. Tune in next week for part 2.
And I wanted to mention, if you haven't seen my free video lesson, 8 tips to avoid overworking your painting, take a look at it. You can follow the link below, or you can get to it in my bio on Instagram. I've gotten some great feedback from this video lesson, and it's been very helpful to solve a big problem that I have had to deal with, and that is overworking your painting. So check out that free video lesson, and I'll see you next time.